Over the years, the public has sent in more than 700 tips. We are confident someone hasn't told investigators everything they know.
And we're asking you to come forward because eventually we're going to find you and we're going to bring you to justice.
Today on Cleveland County Valentine, we're joined by someone with decades of experience that most of us can only imagine. Dr. Chandra Cleveland is a licensed private investigator, certified human trafficking investigator, and former law enforcement officer with over 43 years in the field, including 24 years with the Richland County Sheriff's Department in South Carolina. She is the founder of She Investigations, where she specializes in finding missing and exploited girls, leading trafficking rescues, and training communities around the world to protect vulnerable women and children. Dr. Cleveland has been on the front lines from South Carolina to Afghanistan, and today she's here to help us look at the Asha Degree case through the eyes of someone who knows what to look for and what gets missed. Dr. Cleveland, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. We're really honored to have your voice on this case. First, I'd like to start by going back to your time in law enforcement. You served in the gang unit in Richland County, or you can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but for more than 2 decades. Can you share a bit about what that role involved and how it shaped the way you approach a child abduction or missing persons case today?
Well, it wasn't over 2 decades that I was in the gang unit. I was only in the gang unit for a brief time with Richland County. And during that time, I was very instrumental in solving some major cases in our county. I just moved back here from California and bought a house online. And I noticed some gang tagging within my community. And I think at that time, no one was saying we had a gang problem. So that's when I brought it to the attention of my department. And we were able to say we did have a gang unit. And since I had knowledge of it from living in California, I was selected to be on the gang unit. And we were able to close a lot of cases because of knowledge I already had and the relationship that I already had with the youth in the community.
Okay. So what are some of the first steps as a seasoned investigator that you would take when a child goes missing under unusual or unclear circumstances?
Well, most of the time to me, whether they left on their own or not, but anytime a child is lured away from their home and they are a child, you know that somebody else is involved in it. As I look at it or approach the case, I take several things in consideration. What they did the day before, have they done this before? The parents, how often they're with the child, and also if the child is involved in any activity outside the home, such as sports or choir or anything of such extracurricular activities.
Okay. So the first 24 to 48 hours definitely is important. In your experience, what are just some of the most common investigative missteps in that window?
Oh, wow. The most common one that I would hear from people is that she haven't been missing for 24 hours. That is a myth. It doesn't take 24 hours for your child to be missing in order for you to do a report. That is the most common one that I see a lot of. And also that, when you call law enforcement, they are going to actually be actively looking for your child at the time that you call them. And that if you tell them that your daughter ran away, it's no need in you calling for someone to let them know. Those are myths that I hear, or I can tell you now, I used to hear a lot of. With the information and me being out in the community and giving them the knowledge that they need to make sure that protocol is taken when their child go missing, a lot of them understand that time is of essence. The first thing that you do is contact law enforcement and tell them that your child is missing. And once you do that and they get there to help you, it's very important, if you can afford to, not
Mm-hmm.
to hire me as the investigator, but you
Mm-hmm.
to have an investigator around you so that you can have someone who is actively looking for your child.
Okay. And I want to follow up about that. Have you seen families maybe waiting those 24 hours as you described and kind of withhold that fact that they waited 24 hours, but then they may present that the child just went missing?
Well, no, they usually tell you,
Mm,
if she has been gone a little bit longer and they assume something else or assume that she was with an aunt
mm,
or a cousin, that
okay.
has happened a lot until
Mm,
they find out from the cousin that it's been too long. Let me call her and tell her to bring her home. And they're like, she didn't come over here. And that's when
okay.
the urgency starts, that they start looking for
Okay.
that child.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. So it could also be sometimes that there's just a miscommunication or, one parent thought the child was somewhere else, but then they really weren't. Okay,
Exactly.
all
Mhm.
right. So have you ever worked a case similar to Aisha's case, and was it solved? And what did you find out about that case that surprised you?
Well, first of all, I have never worked a case like Aisha's case.
Mhm.
And I have one of someone else who was older
Mhm.
that I worked in. That case was not solved.
Mm.
And her and she, of course, she's still missing, and we don't have any information on it. That she went missing around Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Mm.
And
Okay.
now it's been almost 17 years.
Oh, wow.
hmm
Okay. Why do you think, in your opinion, do you think that case hasn't been solved?
And that case hadn't been solved. Well, I said 17 years. It's probably been a little bit less than that, but that
Okay.
case has not been solved because I feel some family members were involved.
Mm.
And I say that because as I got closer to finding her, they just moved her. Like, it was two
Mm.
different locations I arrived at, and the last location, clothes of hers and shoes were left in the parking lot. And when I got there, the little girl, another prostitute, she was an adult, and she's like, "Oh, they just left here. You looking for who?" And I showed her the picture. She was like, "They just left here. That's why I'm picking up these clothes and shoes, because they left, like a bat out of hell, and they were putting her in the car, and
Hmm.
the clothes was just trampled behind it. And so I just picked up the shoes and the clothes I wanted." And so
Wow.
that gave me an indication that somebody within the family was a part of the incident, and we have yet to find her.
And this family hired you, is that
Yes,
correct?
they did.
Okay.
Mhm.
And then once, I guess, did you cease your relationship with them, or did they?
Um, the mother just recently passed.
Okay.
We would do a show just to talk about it, or we would do a walk in honor of
Mhm, mhm.
Aaliyah, and we would do it each and every year. But to me,
Okay.
it had some family notion involved.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so let's jump right into the timeline. Um, I know you may have had the chance already to review the timeline and the details surrounding Aisha's disappearance. So what stands out to you immediately as either a red flag or an investigative gap?
Well, as always, in looking for Black missing children, the presence of not much news, worldwide news footage on her disappearance.
Hmm.
Also, with hearing the family said after that 2 week of urgency of looking for Asha, it's
Hmm.
like everything stopped. Nobody else came around. No one kept them updated. They would be calling for information. That is something that I hear all too often. Most of the
Mm-hmm.
families then are thinking, do you really care about my child? No one has called me. I'm calling them. They just tell me nothing's done. They don't give any more information. And when families hear that, it's more stress turned into anger.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, are you really looking for my child?
Mm-hmm.
So with hearing the family said, you know, what are you doing? Are you really looking for my child? They're
Mm-hmm.
not around the family anymore. They're not out combing the neighborhood. They're not out communicating just with the family to see if there's anything or anyone else they could have thought of doing or before the process of Asha going missing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is, the 2 weeks that they stopped the search 2 weeks after she went missing? Is that because they felt that that Aisha had ran away from home, or what reasons would investigators do that?
That's exactly what they did. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know for the life of me why, you know, it would be taken that just because the person left home, we should not find them. This is a
Mm-hmm.
child. In
Right.
Asha's case, this is a baby.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She was just a baby. If
Mm-hmm.
she
Mm-hmm.
willingly left that home with
Mm-hmm.
the items that they said was taken from there, in which they found some of them, then someone is responsible. There's a lot of things within the case at the beginning that I say, okay, everything looks like it went good. It was going
Mm-hmm.
good. You got the
Mm-hmm.
FBI on the second day, the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's usually unusual when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
a Black child missing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was glad to see that part was taken. But
Mm-hmm.
when I went back to look at worldwide news to see if it was on there or whatever the case may be, I could not find it
Mm-hmm.
until after our seasonal things that someone blurted and put out. And to me, that is so crucial that, if it was someone else of another color,
Mm-hmm.
they would be, all out, still out looking,
Mm-hmm.
having all kinds of shows about it,
Mm-hmm.
making sure that anyone who lived within that area, if you saw something, for them to be interviewed. And I just did not see that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like law enforcement started off strong. And then at some point during the search, did they decide that, hey, this is a runaway case, let's end our efforts for some reason?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's kind of like what it seems.
Yeah, it seems that way to me too. And I don't know why that perception always comes when it's to our children, because
Mm-hmm.
I know of many times that I've seen Amber Alerts that they know that that other person went with someone else, and they have a whole Amber Alert. So, with Asha, I feel that an Amber Alert should have went out. I understand the details of which they say they thought they saw a child walking on I guess it's not even a highway, right? It's back roads in the
Mm-hmm.
community. Back roads are really dark. It's very hard to believe that a child would have been walking, but multiple people say they saw her. So maybe it was her. You
Mm-hmm.
need to think on each end. If
Mm-hmm.
she had a backpack, maybe she got away from the person who she was with and they
Mm-hmm.
told her, well, get out the car.
Mm-hmm.
So still you have so many open avenues of the case that it should have been an ongoing case, and the family never should have thought that they were alone after
Mm-hmm.
just 2 weeks of their
2 weeks.
child's missing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, in talking about the runaway conversation, do you believe that Aisha left home voluntarily, or does something else stand out to you?
There's so many things that stand out to me that a child would not do in Asha's case.
Mm-hmm.
A storm, a rainy night, rural roads,
Mm-hmm.
that a 9-year-old will walk in the dark on her own. I don't know if it was known in the area that when you live in a rural area that they may walk to a friend's house really late at night. There are so many questions that I have on that, just looking at her perspective is very different that a 9-year-old would be in that type of environment on that day alone outside when family member says that she is afraid of lightning. She's afraid of the dark. And yet she took it on her own to go off in the middle of the night. So there's a lot of questions to me. That's why it is important for me to know what happened the day before. And as I hear about the basketball game, it comes to my mind that someone after that game could have been grooming her, talking to her about they could do this or they could do that, and for her to meet them at a particular place and she would be able to go with them. Those type of things that come to mind, and that would be the only thing that a child would leave out of her home in the middle of the night and venture out, is that she was promised something by someone else.
Okay. And I think what we hear about child abductions is that they relatively happen during the daytime, like after school, maybe on the way to school. And so I think in particular, like you mentioned and you pointed out, this middle of the night thing, and then the weather, I always thought to myself, what if Aisha changed her mind because she was afraid of those things? I don't know that she knew that it was going to rain that night. So it kind of makes you wonder, the other person, if she was going to meet them, couldn't she have changed her mind? And how would that have affected those plans,
Yeah, exactly. And that was a time where cell phones were just coming out, and she did not have a cell phone. So if you backed out of the situation knowing that the person probably said to her, regardless if it's raining, if you just walk straight over here, my car will be there waiting for you. And she probably did that. And knowing that her neighborhood, her community was her family. So no one would have been up to see her walking that late at night. And of course, the lighting was not good within that area, the rural area in which she lived. So it just brings some factors to the case. But when it's a case like this, that is a cold case for so long, I start with investigating what is the tide that opened the case back up and go backwards in the case matter, as I did here. So finding the book pack, the backpack, what did it contain? Was anything there tested? And how was it tested? It's just so many things that I would concur with the cold case being opened back up with someone finding something. So I would work it really from that angle on back to what they had before.
Okay. So with that, what would you say about the decision making and the communication by Cleveland County Sheriff Department in those early phases of this case?
Knowing what I know and about the people who were involved in this case makes me a little bit more anxious more than ever. Because if evidence was taken and DNA was discovered, who all knew what DNA it matched to? Now, I'm not saying anything is tied to another. What happened to the sheriff that was there during that time? I don't know what happened to him, but finding out that this prominent family was involved in the DNA, according to the DNA lab, that makes me very suspicious. I want to know why an investigator was changed, why it is a sheriff now, a different sheriff now, and my mind just by that time just goes all different directions that pulls all on the same string.
So almost like, is it like a conflict of interest sort of thing that someone higher up felt that this sheriff was not suitable to be over this case, or maybe in general, because of maybe information that came into his possession that maybe he didn't do the right thing with, perhaps?
It's a lot of those questions that I would
Mm-hmm.
need answered.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you have a crime within a small town and you have a prominent family that owns at least three business in a small town that could be tied to this, more than likely you would approach that person and they would tell you you keep your mouth shut on any circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
And now that that person is out the way, we get the results of the DNA. And now you have a question as to what should have done or how long did you know who
Mm-hmm.
that DNA belonged to?
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things to me would be in question that I would sit and have a conversation with that agency
Mm-hmm.
to ask how long did you get these answers back from DNA?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And start from there, and see if we could match some things together and start even interviewing some people who worked the case from the beginning.
Mm. Okay. So, from a gang unit or organized crime perspective, are there any indicators that this case could be connected to broader activity in the area?
No, I
Mm.
didn't see any other cases within that area of anyone missing.
Okay.
This to me did not have any comparison to gang activity.
Okay.
This to me of having a small child disappear in an
Mm-hmm.
already small town,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't happen. There's somebody
Mm-hmm.
within
Mm-hmm.
that town know what happened.
Okay. Okay. So then, what do you make of the tip that was received just a few months prior to Aisha's disappearance that was regarding the suspected drug activity that was on the same street that the Degree family lived? Do you feel that, that was really a separate thing that just kind of, it was just bad timing?
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
I feel they added that to the mix. I don't think that information came in during the 2 weeks that they were out there.
Hmm.
I don't know what timing that information was given.
Okay.
And there too could have been, you know, the the timing you receive the information as to how you put it into your files.
Hmm.
Because as I've said, and I will keep reiterating, in a small town with someone linked to it who has a big status in that
Hmm.
town, a lot of things will be added to the report in order to send the looking or the perspective somewhere else.
Okay. So even with that, is it common for maybe just in general any criminal activity, retaliation, or informant movement to disrupt a community in a way that could make children vulnerable, even unintentionally?
Mm, yes. I mean, if there was actually drug activity there, and you have to go back to the pattern of what has happened there before
Hmm.
Asia um, went missing. Because if no other child um, had been missing or taken or
Mm-hmm,
sex
hmm.
trafficked or
Hmm.
anything like that, why would it start now
With
on this
Aisha.
night, on
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
night
Hmm.
when everybody is at home?
Right. Okay. That brings up a really good point. You really do. Okay. So many individuals are tied to this case from you've got cousins, aunts, uncles, to neighbors, and then you've got the possible suspects that we know of. They all lived within this, relatively short distance, walking distance from the Degree home. How important is it to remap the neighborhood using geographic profiling tools? Could this help isolate someone who had both access and motive?
Yes, definitely. But I think whoever planned this um, is someone everybody knows.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
It's someone everybody knows. I would be very interested in mapping that area and finding out exactly who lived where and checking their backgrounds. I know
Mm-hmm.
that it was done on the weeks that FBI and the sheriff department was there, that
Mm-hmm.
they interviewed people on that street. But
Mm-hmm.
I would, and also looked at their backgrounds and for any person who was on the register,
Mm-hmm.
the sexual assault register in that area. I think this was a person who did something for the first time.
Okay.
This was a first time offense that they set up and took part in it. And either or, like I said before, I think whoever she was supposed to walk out there and meet, either she decided that she didn't want to go with them and
Mm-hmm.
jumped out of the car and started walking from where everybody else had an opportunity to see her. I really think that's what happened, that she got away from whoever had her first.
Okay.
And during her walking on the road that late at night, maybe somebody struck her with a
Mm-hmm.
car
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't actually see her and then stopped and picked her up and put her in the car. This is the only, how should I say it? This is the only scenario my
Mm-hmm.
mind is saying occurred for her to end up almost 25 miles from where she lives.
Mm-hmm.
Someone hit her. They stopped. They panicked. They put her in the car.
Okay. So why do you think, so it sounds like you think that it's another person, possibly. Like there may have been one person and then there was another person. Why do you believe, in your professional opinion, that there were that many steps, you know?
Because
Mm-hmm.
the reason I feel that there was someone else first is
Mm-hmm.
because of where she was seen.
Okay.
And to get on that main road from the
Mm-hmm.
community in which she lives, someone else had to take her there. I don't
Okay.
think, like I said at the beginning, she would walk that far,
Mm-hmm.
even on 18, I think the road is,
Yes.
that she would walk that far alone by herself to get to someone who told her to come out the house.
Mm-hmm.
I think she
Mm-hmm.
came out, she met that person, she was in the car with them. She
Mm-hmm.
is a feisty little girl from what I
Mm-hmm.
see on other things.
Mm-hmm.
So she's like, I wasn't planning for this. And she fought and she got out the car and the person didn't chase her.
Right. Okay.
They had already taken her a good ways away from her house. So
Mm-hmm.
they decided to go where they were going to go.
Okay.
I don't think she had the knowledge or the wherewith after getting out of the car to not to go back to her home
Mm-hmm. Right.
because of it being so dark
Oh,
in the middle of the night. So I
okay.
think she kept walking until she saw someone she knew.
Okay.
When, someone said they saw her and he turned his truck around and she ran in the wood line.
Mm-hmm.
She could have thought the person who she was with before was possibly driving a truck.
Mm-hmm.
And she thought they were coming back and ran in the wood line.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk about that 25 miles away, because you did touch on that, where the book bag and her pocketbook was found. So over the years, and really it's just been, in 2001, they recovered those items. But
Right.
later on, we did find out about the New Kids on the Block nightshirt and then a library book. And we still don't have a lot of information, as the public, about where those items came from. And they've been said to not belong to her, but the book was a book from her school library. But they don't believe it belonged to Asha. This is what her parents have said. What would you want to know as an investigator about how those items were collected, how they were stored and tested? And is it possible those items were maybe planted later? And how would you go about proving or disproving that today?
Well, There's really no way after something has been buried that I have been checking out the resources to really tell how long they were there or was it just planted there.
Mm-hmm.
The book that's there, you can put the book and look at it and see and compare it to the school district and see how long that book was there and possibly who signed out on that book. So you can do that in order to know if that book was missing during the time that like Asha was missing. Um and then the New Kids on the Block shirt, when did that shirt come out? That shirt was not out during that time. Then
Mm-mm.
you need to look at something else. And any other item in there, if it looks like there's any hair on the shirt or any fingerprints they feel they can get off of that book, those
Mm-hmm.
things should have been done.
Mm-hmm.
Even off the plastic bag that was inside the other bag. Those
Mm-hmm.
both bags should have been swapped to see if there's any DNA they could have gotten off that. Because if they didn't get it off of the first bag, surely the other bag should have contained some type of DNA.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting that you mentioned that because law enforcement did state that, they tried to check the records on that library book, but that library records didn't date back that far. And that's the reason why I was wondering, like, well, how long had that book actually been there? Where did it come from? Because they found her book back in 2001, which would have been a year after her disappearance.
Right.
So what does that mean? That library records don't go back that far. Was it not investigated in 2001? Was it assumed that it was her book? There's like a gap, right, of
Right.
understanding of where did this come from and why. What do you mean it's too many years or they
Right.
don't go back that far. So it's very strange. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that.
Yes, that means that all the investigations that could have been done and
Mhm.
with the evidence that received was not done until later.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
exactly what that means, that
Mhm.
upon finding all of this information, you didn't put forth the right investigators to get the information that you needed from what you found at that time, which was only a year later.
Right.
Because then you should have been able to go back to that school a year later
Mhm.
and see who checked this book out.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or maybe they did check it out and that just wasn't put into the report.
Mm. Wow, wow. Okay. So, in a recent interview on a podcast, O'Brien Degree, who's the older brother of Asha Degree, he had mentioned more than once that the windows in the bedroom that he and Asha shared together were nailed shut. And I know that in some archive footage, I think it may have been WNC Charlotte, I'm not sure. There's a large dresser that's like blocking the same window that he was referring to. And I wonder, from an investigative standpoint, are those sort of details, are they significant? Him saying that the windows were nailed shut. Does that give you any indication about their environment or even indication about just Aisha Degree herself?
Yeah, well, I did see that he said the windows were nailed shut. My mom in our house when I was little, our windows were nailed shut
Mhm.
because of different gang activity. And I know it wasn't gang activity back then, but guys coming around going into people's windows. Some of the people in the area would come into your windows. And the only window that wasn't nailed shut in our house when we were little was my mom's windows. But our windows were nailed shut. So, I was thinking, okay, yes, I remember those days of the
Mhm.
windows being nailed down. So that was just another safety precaution that moms did back in the days when they had to be at home until dad gets home.
Mhm. Mhm.
For
Mhm.
our
Mhm.
family, that was the reason why. I'm not sure, but now of looking at some of the other things that there was some drug selling within that neighborhood
Mhm.
that the Degree family lived in. So maybe
Mhm.
that's why they decide to nail their windows shut that nobody can get into the house.
So it definitely does appear to be that it was to keep people out and not necessarily to, keep
Right.
anyone from leaving. Okay. And
Definitely.
speaking of O'Brien again, he was only 10 when she
Mhm.
disappeared. How would you treat child witnesses decades later, especially when you've got things like trauma and family loyalty that can influence memory?
Well, I really hope, and I see now today's when I go into environments where a child is missing and they have a sibling that was there that is missing them, that they got him some counseling at an
hmm
early age so that,
hmm
when his are thoughts start maturing and he start asking more questions about things, that they had someone there to actually help him to navigate through those thoughts of his sister not being there anymore. Because from what I saw and heard from him, they were quite competitive, especially
hmm
when it came to sports
hmm
part of their lives. So young people who are there, they need that mental counseling
hmm
in order to deal with it and for them to have a successful life because,
hmm
they start self blaming
hmm
and you start seeing some things that occur that shouldn't be. And you have to know as a parent how to deal with those things. So, I hope he got the necessary counseling that he needs for losing his sister.
Yeah, it does appear in some of the reports that at least that I've read that did start receiving counseling almost immediately
Mhm.
afterwards, and I think it's a very tragic experience to happen, especially like you mentioned, as self-blame comes
Mhm.
in because you blame yourself for what happened, and if you were away,
Mhm.
would this have
Mhm.
occurred?
Yes, yes, yes.
Right. So over the years, we've got the timeline surrounding Aisha's disappearance. It seems to have shifted noticeably by the family, depending on just the news outlet that you're reading or that you're
Mhm.
watching or following. And so, in your professional experience, there's a lot of conversation about how critical it is to nail down a precise timeline in the early stages of when a child goes
Right.
missing. And so when it changes or it appears to change, right, because we're not a part of the investigation, is that a red flag? Does it raise a red flag? Or is that just something that can be explained away by stress or trauma?
Definitely trauma. A victim may think, or from playing it back into their mind so much, they may think about other things that come to
hmm
play. And sometimes when you're in that trauma and everything is all around, your brain don't think, but you start hearing other people say things and you start perceiving that, no, maybe this happened or that happened. That's why you have to make sure you have the trauma informed people within the
hmm
case to notice that
hmm
this may not be something that they were covering up and just bringing up now. This
hmm
may have been the stress of them thinking about it, that they now see it a little different from hearing
hmm
other people's testimony.
So how do you think law enforcement would be able to fill in the gaps that, like, well, in the early stages, if there's information that might be missing, because the family is stressed, it's under a lot of stress in the moment. Is that where the investigation part kicks in? If the family just can't, give information that makes sense to them?
It depends on where you're taking this.
hmm
If at the beginning the investigators did not talk to everybody that they needed to talk to,
Mm-hmm. hmm
if after talking with the parents to make sure that they talk to all of the people that are living within that area, and sometimes it's just that after they look back over the case and they have written things down handwritten, which they would have, I think, around that time,
hmm hmm
written things down and left some things off during their report. So now that they see it and it has a second set of eyes
Mm-hmm.
on it, these persons who are looking at it from a second set of eyes saying, was this ever talked about this
hmm
person right here that's written on the side of the paper?
Yeah.
And if
Wow.
they cannot answer that, they need to go back and talk to that person.
Mhm. Okay, that's good information. And I could definitely see that a lot of this earlier part of the case 25 years ago may have been written down information and then
Hmm.
may
Hmm.
have got lost in translation or in transition. So it's been stated that Aisha may have left home that night because she was upset about her performance or the outcome of her basketball game on Saturday. I know we talked about that earlier on.
Hmm.
And in many cases involving Black children, we often see the label runaway applied very quickly, even though there could be other circumstances that don't support that. Do you
Right.
think that in this situation that the label of the runaway label, do you think that has hindered the urgency or direction of the early part of the investigation? I don't. It's almost feeling like it was an intentional label in a way sometimes because of the way that they investigated it early on.
Mhm. Well, it has been proven by the National Missing and Exploited Children that that label of runaway does hinder and direct how most law enforcement agency look for a child. So
Hmm.
that is the reason why I think in 2015 they stopped using the label runaway for
Mm,
putting on their database and on their website. They say missing. All
hmm,
kids are missing. There's
hmm,
no runaway now labeled on
hmm,
their page in their organization. And I think that's the way it should be for everyone,
hmm,
especially if it's a child that cannot fend for themselves,
hmm,
such as Asia.
hmm, hmm. And with that being the basketball game, that's brought up a lot in the media. Whatever may have happened at the basketball game. Have you seen in your investigations situations where pressure or fallout from youth athletic events may have escalated into something more serious? I mean, we also talked about like basketball coaches and people that
Mhm.
are available and around in those types of environments.
Mhm.
What are some of the signs, that could typically emerge as a stage runaway narrative in response to a high pressure situation like a game, a child's competitive game?
Oh, definitely. And that's what my thinking was with this game. If everybody was cleared, such as the coach and everyone,
Hmm.
who is that other person that's always at the athletic
Mm,
events cheering on kids?
mm,
Because it's not always necessary one of the coaches or an
mm,
adult that is involved with the team, but it
mm,
could be an adult who's on the benches sitting there looking in.
mm,
They go and they look at a child's vulnerability. They see
mm,
what they want. They map out what they want with this kid, and they know what they can promise them in order to bring them or convince them to come to them. So, everybody who was at that game that night, I would want to go to a game and talk to everybody who was there or put out a request in the community. If you
hmm.
were at this game, we would love to talk to you. We're trying to
Okay.
gain as much information as possible about Asia, Asha, uh, that game and that night. What did you see?
Hmm.
While it's fresh in their minds to see if they saw someone, afterwards talking to her and
Hmm.
smiling with her and say, you know what, you're a good ball player. Did anyone see that? Because
Hmm.
those are some of the things that we need to tie to. Because I truly believe that she was able to get away from whoever had her first and
Hmm.
to end up where she was, because you cannot tell me and that she walked that distance that she did where she was seen and observed by those other drivers.
Right, right, because it would be pretty far. I
Mhm.
know that the basketball game was recorded by someone. I don't know if it may be another family member, and they have played clips of it in the media. Never the whole thing. I don't know if that's important, if they should be sharing the whole game. What do you think about that? Is that something that would typically be released as the entire footage, or is just clips only necessary?
The video part of the game would not have been done because what I would be interested in seeing as an investigator are the people who were there and watching the interactions after the game.
Okay.
Part of the game going is not even of interest to me. I want to know what happened after the game. Who was consoling her? Who was around looking at her? Who was there then when she decided to walk away and be alone? So that's why it's important for me to talk to all of those who were at the game, because I know the direction in which I want clarity as to who all talked to her that day to try to console her. Whoever you saw, even as a parent, I would ask the parent that, who did you see consoling your daughter in her major defeat?
And that's interesting you brought that up, because the Charlotte Observer had mentioned that, or was the Shelby Star, one of those outlets, stated that, Chad Wilson, who was, one of the basketball coaches, did console her after their game. But it sounds like something that would be typical, right, of a coach, because after her game, her brother played. So it's common for people to sit down after the game and watch the next game. And so his behavior, did he console her? Yes, because she was sad. But he said that, the entire team was sad because they lost. So his behavior doesn't really stand out other than what would be typical, right, for a coach, who has developed relationships amongst his players. But that's it. They don't mention anything else.
Yeah. There are people out here, and I tell parents who have children that are in sports to make sure you look at anybody who's coming in contact with your child, because their contact is not always helpful.
Right.
It could be a grooming process. And just because your child loves that sport and that person seemed to admire the way they play, it can be misconstrued into something else.
So I want to fast forward to 2024, which was just last year. Rumors did circulate that Asha Degree's body may have been recovered during one of the search warrants. And, law enforcement later came forward and they confirmed that there was no body that was found. In your professional opinion, do such rumors tend to get started in that kind of way? Because it does kind of make you wonder, is it true? In this case, it definitely sounds like it wasn't true. But would it be typical for law enforcement to withhold a discovery like that
No.
to the public? Okay.
No. No, it would not.
Okay.
It will not be anything like that. They would withhold. And nowadays, with a missing person, our worst enemy as an investigator is to pay attention to the people who are on the internet saying things happened that did not. Because that will take your investigation totally down a rabbit hole that you didn't need to go down, and you needed to stay on top so that you can get all the great information, the correct information, evidence that you can concur and test out that it occurred. So no, I don't think they would have kept that out. Now, with 2024 coming and some years back in 15 and 17 about the DNA being held all of those years. And they, from my reading, it was not like they did another DNA testing with new technology as they want to claim. I think that DNA was held, and as soon as they found out about who it belonged to, I think that became a chess game in the community. So I think it was like, hold off to reporting this or saying that we got this or that. And then when it came to a point where someone else was able to look at this DNA and come in and up the reward, that's when I feel things start happening. The DNA came up. We know whose DNA it is. We're going to go after these people. So we're going to start doing some investigation around them. Let's go ahead and tap their phone. So when they start getting information that almost beyond a shadow of doubt confirm their suspicion that this family knows something, it's like, why can't you now take the information that you have? Because to me, you have more than enough to take it in front of a grand jury and see if it can be tied over. What is the holdup about that? I do not know. Because someone comes in and they pass a polygraph or not pass a polygraph, please know that during these days and time, a polygraph means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because just as you have a polygraph, there are ways out here to tell you how to beat a polygraph. But the words that you text and the words that are on the phone coming directly from your mouth, that is enough. That is enough circumstantial evidence to bond over for a grand jury, in my thought. And why
when you say that,
done yet? That's a big question mark for me.
Is it because of, I know conversations that come up, especially we had an expert on the podcast, our last, and for episode 11, is about this touch DNA. Because I think a lot of us thought that it was blood or semen, and it was more like of a transfer DNA. Could that be, in your experience with cases where there are such types of DNA, is that something that kind of holds people or law enforcement up from indicting somebody, charging or arresting somebody?
Yeah, it does. And I think they had mitochondria DNA, which means mother or family something. I think they didn't have to wait on that part in order for them to bond them over for a grand jury or to get a warrant for them. Their conversations is more damaging than anything that should have had them to arrest them and hold someone accountable. And I really think that living with this information that I am confirmed, I'm concerned that they know it may be the release that they've been waiting for someone to come and really talk to them.
And it doesn't seem like no one's going to talk from the Dedman family, at least. It doesn't appear that anyone's going to, if they haven't spilled their guts in, 25 years, it just doesn't seem like it's coming.
Okay, let me tell you this. If you come to the, let me stop laughing about it because it's not funny. It's very sad that just because somebody has money, you refuse to, as an agency, to demand that they come in and answer these questions because you have this information. If they want to go ahead and clear their names, we need them to answer questions about these conversations that they had over the phone. Right. About don't talk to law enforcement, don't do this. There's a reason. And if they would have necessarily put the pressure on them saying, this is going to happen, and do those interviews and demand to get them done, I don't think we would be here. If it was anyone else, they would not even take anyone else and say, we have this information and we got a warrant, we're going to put you in jail. That would have been done long time ago, especially when they got those phone calls back that they had listened to. That would have been done as fast as they could put them on a tape recorder and get them to a judge to sign the warrants.
Wow.
But yet we still wait after the evidence point to that they know something.
And so, they brought in, it's not just a local PD, but they brought in the FBI, the SBI. What do they have? What ties, would they have to not? Because I don't know who would be the one to be pushing this forward to get an indictment. I don't know if it would just be the sheriff's department, because you wonder about those neutral parties, the FBI and the SBI. Why are they not? Why is that not being pushed forward so that way we could see an arrest?
Okay, you said the magical word.
Sheriff's department.
People, they bought in. They bought in. So if they brought them in and they don't have the other information that ties to this, then they can't say this is what we need to do. They can make a recommendation. And just because you hear those other alphabet boys who've been added to the soup, it doesn't mean that the soup is complete. When people are bought into the case, still they only get to see what that department shows them.
Wow. It makes a lot of sense. You know, in your experience as an investigator, private investigator, you know, is the family the only people, the family of the victim, are they the only ones that could hire you? Or could the community or a third party with some vested interest in uncovering the truth also hire you for a case?
No, it has to be the family.
Okay. So investigators rarely go and take on cases that they really want to see solved. They have to have that permission.
You have to.
Wow. Man, okay. So in the event that, let's say, the family did, you know, if you were brought into this case today, what would be the first three things you want to review, re-interview, or reanalyze? Just the first three.
The first thing I would want to do is find out exactly where those truck drivers saw her walking.
Okay.
I would want to look at that area in comparison to where she lived.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing I would like to do is see exactly where that truck driver turned around and she ran into the wood line. From that point to the 25 miles to the area in which they found her book bag,
So I do know from just the reports that the first truck driver, where he did see her walking, she was already a mile and a half away or 1.3 miles away from home by that time. And when he claims that he turned around in a pantry that was operating a local convenience store at the time. And he claims that he turned around in that parking lot. And that's how he did a U-turn there, because this is just a 2-lane road. And when he got back onto the road to see if that's what he saw, that's when he observed her still walking. And I don't know if maybe that pantry may have been an additional, I don't know, maybe an additional half a mile from where he saw her. And then when she ran into that wood line, there was a shed, which would have been a mile and a half from her home. Still kind of far. This is about a 30-minute walk for her. That's pretty darn far. And then she's walking away from home.
Exactly.
You know, which is the weird part.
Exactly. And that goes back to me saying someone else had her.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting ready to drive off. She didn't think, or whatever the case may be, there was a struggle within that car and she jumped out of the car.
Mm-hmm.
And he had already pulled away from her neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And her not wanting to go would have happened at about that distance. When kids find out the person or whoever is not good for them and they're in their car, that's when stuff break bad.
Wow. So in your view, what needs to happen now, whether it's law enforcement, the media, or the community, just to put real pressure on the right people and get this case closer to resolution?
They need to, I would think that the FBI should have taken over this case by now. Okay. They should have taken over, especially when they got the phone tap. That case should have been put in their hands. That county has such a small police department that need to focus on other things. The FBI should have taken it over. After they got the interview of the tapping of those phones, somebody should have been under arrest right now. And they should be demanding that this family talks to them. They can have a lawyer present or whatever they should need to do. But if they refuse to talk, then they need to take the information in front of a grand jury and do an indictment and have them charged.
What would be the charge? I know they mentioned the concealment. That's what they believe is that
That's it.
they concealed her body.
Concealment as of that, all that they know, and also that interfering with a crime or being a part of a crime after the fact. There's so many things after looking at the evidence and really hearing in detail of the phone conversations, because I'm sure they only released a few that they wanted to release, that I don't know what all was said within those phone conversations, but I feel that from what they release now, it's enough to have indicted someone to have gotten an arrest warrant for someone.
And what do you think is the most damning in that? Is it that they are throwing dad under the bus, or what is it that you feel like is, this is bad, this definitely means something in those text messages?
Don't say anything. Don't talk to them. If you had nothing to do and your sister and you were called in, girl, they came and questioned me. Why they questioned me? I don't know that girl. That would have been it. It wouldn't have been, don't say anything. Or why we didn't do, I told you what to do the last time so we wouldn't have to do this. Come on. Come on. They know something.
Yeah. Do you believe in this young man that came forward that said he was a friend of the Dedmon sisters, Thad Melentine? Do you think he was someone that they brought in just to say something, to put pressure on them? Or do you think that she confessed to killing Asha Degree at a party?
Yes. I wanted to know what year. That was just in 2015, 17?
No, so that he said that it occurred like in 2009 or 2008.
No. I'm talking about when they said, when he came forward.
Oh, when he came forward. Yeah. So he came forward last September after the search warrants.
And he passed a polygraph that what he said was true.
That's what they said, yes.
That is all a part of all of this that I said of the wiretapping that occurred after that. And with him saying that, I don't know what they're waiting on. I don't know what they're waiting on.
Wish we knew. Well, Dr. Cleveland, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insight, your experience, and your heart. Do you have any final words for our listeners today?
Just know that you need to protect your children. If your child ever goes missing, please urge people to help join you in hiring a private investigator, so these things will not be 25 years from now of your child being found. Also, there are other equipment and things as a parent to make sure that if something happens to your child, that you're adamant about getting help in order to find them sooner than later.
I agree. Well, thank you again for your perspective. It's definitely given us a lot to think about, and I know our listeners will walk away from this episode with just a much deeper understanding of the case. I hope that we can meet up again soon and talk some more about this case. Hopefully there'll be some new updates coming soon. But again, yes, thank you for your time, and I look forward to working with you again.
Sounds great. I look forward to, and anything I can do to help anyone that's out there, they can go to my social media and inbox me for any questions that they may have.
Yes, how can we reach you? If anybody out there wants to get in contact with you, how can they get in touch with you?
They can email me at cleveland@she-picgroup.com. And you can also go to my social medias at investigator Chandra Cleveland and leave me an inbox message.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And like I said, we'll go ahead and get out of here, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Cleveland County Valentine. If you haven't already, please like and follow us on Facebook, or leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I would also like to encourage anyone who knows anything at all about Asha's disappearance to come forward and share what you know. I want this podcast to be an outlet for people surrounding this case. Have yourself a great rest of the week and join us next time for a new episode of Cleveland County Valentine.